The committee today has received testimony from the command, the SOUTHCOM and AFRICOM. This is a very significant meeting because we have, in my narrow view, we have the two comms that never were adequately resourced. I really believe that, compared to the threat that we're facing. We have two great heroes here. We have General Steve Townsend, a commander of the U.S. AFRICOM, and Admiral Craig Fowler, commander of SOUTHCOM. This committee's top priority is to ensure the effective implementation of the National Defense Strategy. That's this, and we have been adhering to this to the letter as near in a very bipartisan way. We identify the competition with China and Russia. That's where the problem is. That's something that people were really sensitive to until we came out with this document. China and Russia's growing influence isn't limited to Europe and the Indo-Pacific. Both countries clearly view Africa and Latin America as critical battlefields to fulfill their global ambitions and challenge the United States. This is particularly evident in Africa. Over the last 20 years, I've conducted I think we're over about 160 African country visits working with that continent. I can tell you that it's no coincidence that China established the first overseas military base in Djibouti. You know, that's the first time that they've done it. They've always done it in their own city limits before, but now it's Djibouti, and now they're as far south in Africa as Tanzania and all over the country. I visited Djibouti last February and saw firsthand what they are doing there, and they are active there. Elsewhere, China is using the cash and debt to trap countries and to force them to put their infrastructure and potentially their sovereignty on sale. At the same time, Russia is using its military, mercenaries, and weapons sales to buy influence, exploit Africa's natural resources, and to prop up leaders sympathetic to Russian interest and hostile to the United States. While the NDS states that competition with Russia and China should be DOD's top priority, it makes clear that we must maintain pressure on radical terrorist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. Today, more than a dozen terrorist groups with ties to Al-Qaeda and ISIS are operating across Africa. Many of these groups have ambition to attack Americans and our partners. Without sustained pressure, the threat posed by these groups will grow. In SOUTHCOM's area of responsibility, China and Russia are pursuing similar strategy by using economic and military means to expand their access and influence right here on our own hemisphere. China has increased its naval deployments by the region by 70% over the last 5 years. In China, Chinese companies currently have over 50 active port projects in this region, and there are more on the planning board. Russia props up oppressive regimes in places like Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua that are hostile to the United States. They're also deploying advanced military assets to the region, including strategic bombers and warships. And at the same time, much of the drugs that are poisoning the American cities are coming from Latin America. These drugs are trafficked by illicit networks. And I'd say in my opening statement that in both of these comms, I've been pretty outspoken as a conservative, but one who's really been concerned because they don't seem to get the attention that some of the other comms do. I mean, you know, if you look at Africa, you have a total of 6,000 people there. Now, but how much are you going to get accomplished with 6,000 people? You look at CENTCOM, what's that, 75,000. Actually, and PACOM's even bigger than that. So if the object here that people are talking about and the subject that's taking place is to reduce and to reposition people, you're talking about the two areas where there aren't enough people to reposition. And that's a narrow view, but that's mine. Senator Reid.